And after all that, I was board certified in internal medicine, occupational medicine, and medical toxicology. And my wife said she would kill me if I got any more. So I did.
What do you want to do, Chris?
How much more time do you have, sir?
Probably another half an hour.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you need a break, or it's up to you.
We're going to take a break at some point. Is it better now or is it better later? Later? Okay, let's go. Next slide. I showed you a house. Go back to that one real fast. Let's suppose for a second that I took this level and I put it on top of this house. And that's all I can do. And I slipped it up there on that ridge line, right? That roof. Okay? And just like this one, it's not level. It's not level. I've measured it. Can you tell from this level where that house isn't level? In other words, did it become no longer level down here at the foundation?
Yana, can we approach?
Yes.
So, let everyone do active proceedings. Is there ever going to be evidence that the ORP meter would tell you when hydrazine was introduced into the real water house? It tests electricity. Go to the next one. Test versus measure. Testing evaluates performance, quality, functionality. Example, crash test dummy equals vehicle safety. Measuring quantifies specific attributes or characteristics. Example, kitchen scale does not equal food safety. If I decide to put 3 cups of flour to make cookies, right? The kitchen scale to measure that 3 cups, okay, tells me how much weight I have, but does it tell me whether or not I also added in some spoiled cheese? No. So this is what we're going to get to. Next slide. Test. This is the definition. There's some definitions that were shown to you earlier. This is the definition for test. Addition. Test means by which the presence, quality, or genuineness of anything is determined. A means of trial. We try it. To apply a test as a means of analysis or diagnosis. To bring, this is out of Black's Law, so we have dictionary.com, Merriam-Webster, Black's Law. To bring one to a trial examination, to ascertain the truth or the quality or fitness of a thing. We're going to test it. Is it fit? Something by which, this should be not high, by which to ascertain the truth respecting another thing. A criterion, gauge, standard, norm. Thank you. Next one. Measure. This is different than test. The dimensions, capacity, or amount of something ascertained by measuring. To ascertain the extent, dimensions, quality, capacity, especially by comparison with a standard. 3, act of taking measurements using meaningful standardized units, in this case a volt, to quantify values. For example, one measures dimensions to quantify length, width, weight, mass. That's measuring. In this case, volts. Okay? Let's go on to the next one. ORP meters do not test for safety. Do not detect contaminants. Do not indicate presence of bacteria, contaminants, or toxins. Can't do any of that. On the next one. Now, Mr. Kemp told you about an investigation. several. And he mentioned to you the FDA, the Southern Nevada Health District, and the CDC. Those are at least 3 of them, right? So the Southern Nevada Health District did an investigation. It ended up being a 231-page report. Mentions of ORP, 0. 566-page complaint for permanent injunction against real water, including exhibits. How many times did it talk about an ORP meter?
Objection. Okay. And counsel, I want to thank you for your assistance. And we'll move on. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're admonished to converse amongst yourselves or anyone else on the subject of this trial, or to read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial by any persons connected to this case, or by any medium of information, including without limitations, newspaper, television, radio, social media. I know you understand that, but I have to give it to you every time we break. Or to form express any opinion on any subject connected to the trial to the process when it's submitted to. We'll take 10. You'll go back to the jury deliberation room and make it easy for you. You like that better? I would imagine you did, because you have a little privacy and those type of things. So when they're ready, we're ready.
Yes, sir. All rise to the court to the jury.
Please be seated and thank you.
All right. And we can continue on, and we had an objection sidebar, which I sustained. Regarding the slide, I know Mr. Odou has a concern about one of the slides that was shown. He would like to take a look. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to take a look at it.
All right.
Would you like it up here, or would you like it here? Joel, just want to look at it here. How would you like it?
We can put it on the screen
Put it on
now,
screen
it's
so
fine.
everybody can see.
Okay.
No, sir, that's okay. Mr. Odou, if you want to step up.
Yeah, wherever you can put it up, you guys will be fine.
Very much.
Well, it's not that one. Here we go.
it is right there.
Yeah, the very second line is in this one.
I don't think it doesn't mention the bank.
No, I was worried there was.
It's all right.
Something
I
else.
don't think I would use it just because the injunction shouldn't be mentioned, but it's not as bad as it could be.
Yeah, I thought there was something else.
implies that there was a, the company out of business.
That's the issue, you know.
Right.
We didn't open that door and object to that door being opened.
And so I sustain the objection sidebar. I'll sustain an open court. We'll take the slide down and won't be shown.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, anything else?
That's it, John.
Yeah, I think Mr. Rasmussen is going to flip over to his argument and sit at the bench, which is fine. I like to hear his argument, but maybe just the evidence.
Well,
Go back to the evidence.
I will say this. I mean, we all know, we're professionals. We know what the purpose of opening statement is, right? And there should be a roadmap as to what you anticipate the evidence will be during the course of the trial. Nothing more, nothing less. And I think it's important to point out that as a trial judge, I try not to get involved unless called, right? And so all I can say is this: we're going to try to finish up and make sure we follow the mandate. That this should be a discussion as to what you anticipate the evidence will be during the course of the trial. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and break, and as soon as the jury's ready, we're ready.
Yes, Your
And,
Honor.
I don't know what we're gonna get. Mr. Robbins, how much time do you have, sir? I'm gonna tell you this right now. I'm not gonna place an artificial time limitation.
I wouldn't think it'd be too much over 3 hours.
I put them up to it.
I would say 15 minutes.
Whatever it is, sir. That's, you know, because we were hoping to have testimony by guys.
We're ready whenever they're ready. I think it's good.
Okay.
Please be seated.
Okay, we're on the record.
All right, we're back on the record. Not ready for the jury, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is Mr. Kemp?
He's right out there. We can.
Oh, no, that's okay. We can go ahead. Yeah.
No, you can go.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we didn't overlook anything.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And anyway, I just want to give everyone a reminder that, you know, we do have a jury here. And I'll just share a little story with you. I remember probably about 20 plus or minus years ago, I was trying a case, and it was in front of Judge Hupperker. And I don't know if you knew Judge Hupperker, but he was a really good judge. He was.
Good mediator, too.
Oh, good mediator. He could be tough. But I tried a couple cases in front of him. I learned a lot from Judge Hupperker. I really respected him because, you know, he was always prepared. He could be a little careful. But he was interesting in this one respect. He thought you were prepared. He believed in law. But here's my point. This is what I learned because I was trying a case against Mr. Parker's partner, Mr. Nelson. This a long time ago, right? And Mr. Nelson was a fine lawyer. He was. He really was. And a really nice person, too. And I actually think that was the first biomechanical case in the history of the state of Nevada. I really do, because it was never heard of before that. But here's my point. I remember we're in the process of trying a case, and I was reading the deposition, and it was a direct examination of the medical doctors. And you know, sometimes those can be a little tedious. And in fact, my clients were from Detroit, Michigan, and there were 4 plaintiffs. And so it was taking a little longer than I had hoped. And here's my point. I remember Judge Hupperker requested that we approach the bench. And we did, of course, and he looked at us, and he looked at me and said one thing. He said, Timothy, you're losing them. He didn't say speed up. He didn't say I'm going to limit your time or any of those things. And I immediately understood exactly what he meant. So I went and asked the court for 2 or 3 minutes. I talked to, you know, the person reading the deposition and realized that we needed to pick this up very quickly because he was right. I was potentially losing the jury, right? And so my point is this, and I think this is one important component of being a trial lawyer. We can have what our plan is from a prosecution and the defense of a case and what we're going to say in front of a jury, but it's important, just as important too, to be able to sit and read the jury and make a determination as to whether maybe I'm taking too long or maybe I need to hit it hard and then sit down. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, they decide, you know, the ultimate outcome. And all I'm trying to say is this, you know, this is the very outset of this trial. Just remember, we have to be efficient. We have from what I can tell, a jury that's very much engaged. And just understand that, you know what, we don't always have to follow our script. Sometimes we have to cut things to be a little bit effective. But at the end of the day, it's your case. I'm not going to put our official time limitation on anyone. But understand, you know, it's not just time, it's effectiveness too, right? And I just want everybody to understand that, that's all. So let's try to be efficient. You know, we've done a great job up until now. There's no question about it. And I anticipate we'll continue down that path. Any questions? All right, we can bring the jury back in.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I do think that was the first biomechanical case in the history of the state.
I tried one in front of Judge Hupperker,
Yes.
and he was motivated.
Yes, he would. That's a really good way to say it.
Did you retain the biomechanical expert?
No, it was the defense. He was an orthopedic engineer, board certified orthopedic surgeon, mechanical engineer. It's funny how I even remember his name, Dr. Peter Adden out of San Antonio, Texas. You know.
That's the secret. Get the doctors / engineer.
I had $37 in property damage.
And they call it bio.
And I got all the money, all the meds paid.
Good job.
And I got him paying suffering.
That's good.
Oh, you learn a lot.
But Todd was a good lawyer too.
Oh, he was an excellent lawyer. There's no question about it.
Is that your former partner, Teddy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he was a great guy. University of Oregon Beaver. I'm no, what is that? Ducks. Yeah, he was a duck. Yeah. I remember he was a duck before the Ducks. At that time, they weren't very good.
All rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Thank you.
All right, and the parties stipulate to the presence of the jury.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to continue on.
All right, I'm going to try to wrap up here by talking a little bit about warnings and instructions, okay? Let me go ahead and show those slides. I'll start with number 1. Showed this one, showed you about the warning that's right there on the box of an ORP meter. Let's go to the next one. To the other side, and it talks to you about this meter and all the different kinds of probes that you can do and use and that sort of stuff. Okay, next one. This is that oxidation kit. Okay, and I believe we have one in the box. I'm just going to show it to you. It's the Milwaukee MA 9025 ORP probe conditioning kit. And it has the instructions on how you use the kit, okay? They bought over 60 of these. That would be Real Water, bought 60 of these different kits. And it conditions that probe, the one that you handed around to you, tells you all sorts of things. And we'll get into this in more detail, but it's going to tell you things about how do you use it, that sort of stuff. Let's go on to the next one. Then along with it, it also has some warnings for laboratory and industrial use only. It says things, okay? There's some warnings. This is on there as well. Let's go to the next one. So then there's instructions that come with it, okay? And he says this is just not a lot, it's not thick, it's okay. Remember, how hard is it to use? I put the probe in the water, turn it on, and it gives me a reading. Simpler than a calculator. Okay, go to the next one. Okay. Those are the warnings that it came with. One of the things that if we can go back, is there was an email that they showed you from a guy named Kemp Bush. Mr. Kemp showed you that. Says he was a former employee of Real Water. Okay? I think the evidence will show that. Okay? His email asked about calibration. The ORP meter, let's go to the next page, please. The meter is factory calibrated. We believe that's what the evidence is going to show. We take out a thing which means you don't calibrate it ever again. Okay? From the factory in Romania, it's calibrated there, it comes out, it comes all the way to the consumer, and they don't have to ever calibrate it again. Okay? Go to the next one. We heard some stuff about testing. That CE up there tells you that the Milwaukee instrument conforms to CE European directives. And you get that stamp to say that, which means that it was tested. Do we know, does my company know whether or not the Real Water was tested? No. We just know our product was, and it conforms to all of the directives of Europe, because it's a European product. European products, what else? Like Ferrari or a Porsche or a BMW or Mercedes or a Volvo or Peugeot. Or if I was over in Asia, it might be a Sony, right? Or a Kia or a Honda, right? Those are all foreign products. And can foreign products be brought into the U.S. court? Yeah. Yeah. But in Europe, if I'm going to manufacture something, I'm going to agree with those right there. Now, remember, there was warnings on there about the stuff in that oxidation kit. Well, that oxidation kit, and any remnants of it, went down the drain, right? So nobody got a toxin from the oxidation kit or from an ORP meter. Let me make sure you understand. There is no way an ORP meter can foresee that someone was going to put hydrazine into a bottle of water for people to drink. We read electricity. I feel bad for these people. I wish they'd never been poisoned. I really do. So let me talk to you finally about some damages. Make sure I've handled that. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
You heard Mr. Odou get up here and tell you, here's how much it costs for these people to be in the hospital. And what did he say about every time he gave you an amount? We'll take care of it. I don't disagree with him. Okay. So I'm going to ask you not to look to me to pay for something he's already taken responsibility for. As a distributor of the Hanna OR commuter, we shouldn't be. They've already accepted liability. They've already said that they will pay. That's when it comes to pain and suffering. I say it as simply as I can. What pain when all of the water went down the drain did any of these people suffer because of an ORP meter, regardless of the reading? Someone's going to have to tell you scientifically and give you evidence that conditioning somehow affects accuracy. And it better be someone who's qualified to do so. Next is punitive damages. So you punish the distributor, even if I'm related to a Romanian company. Because then you're saying, since you're related to them over in Romania, that's why we're doing this. Well, is the Romanian company over here? How about the parent company? Are they over here? The distributorship. You'll get the law on distributors. I've said that 2 or 3 times. I want to make sure you got that. You'll figure that out. But punitively, should I be punished? Because when I sold this to Mr. Robbins' company in Milwaukee, and they sold it to Real Water, and we can't read hydrazine, we're supposed to be punished? I have a level. Better you get a tire gauge, which reads stuff. It doesn't know that you put in your tire helium or nitric oxide. We just call it NOx. It's in a movie, Fast and Furious. Put NOx in the tires and makes them go faster. Do I do that? I don't know. The tire gauge just tells you what the pounds per square inch is in the tire.
Your Honor, we had a sidebar about this.
No.
Objection sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Punish those responsible if you feel that you need to, after you've heard all the evidence for causing the poison. Right? We didn't sell titanium tubes. We didn't sell chemicals. We didn't sell the tanks. We didn't sell that D&L machine. We didn't sell the storage. We didn't put it into a storage facility without air conditioning. We just sold them something that measures. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Robbins, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, good afternoon. Like Judge Williams said, the openings are a roadmap. So I'm just going to give you my quick roadmap. I've got 4 or 5, maybe 6 points I want to hit, and that'll be it for me. And then we'll get to the witnesses. Maybe today, we'll see. So I started thinking, you know, how did we all get here today? And I think, well, let's go back to the beginning of this. Let's go back to John Marlowe. We heard a little bit about John Marlowe, right? flunked chemistry, tested the real water secret formula on himself. I don't know if he was as skinny as he was in that picture back then, but that was his testing. I mean, the facts are gonna say, whether it's by depot, whether he comes in here, I don't know if he's gonna come in or not, but he drank his formula, and if it made him sick, he backed off the ingredients, and if he felt good, he added more to it. Okay, that's essentially what he did. No background in food and beverage, no chemistry background. And what does he do? He goes and he gets he makes his product through these titanium tubes. Gets them from someone, we'll have to ask him where. But he then goes out and licenses this product, his real water, so to Real Water, and by the Jones family, and Blaine Jones, okay? So I started thinking, you know, we started talking this morning, well, let's talk Blaine Jones and Real Water. You heard from Plaintiffs' Counsel, there's no safety testing done on this product before it goes out. They just sort of take what Marlowe gives them and say, hey, we can sell this, and it goes out. Okay, those are the facts. There's no safety testing. So this is a food, actually water I think falls under food product, but it's bottled water. And you have to do some type of testing to make sure that everything that touches your product is safe, and the formula is safe, and whatever ingredients you're putting in is safe, your bottling procedures are safe. Everything should be tested before it goes out. Had that happened, none of us would be here today. Okay. So we talked about famous combos. This morning we put the MW500 in the MA9025 kit. So, you know, and Shaq and Kobe, good combo. But, you know, the combo that should be up there is Marlowe and Jones. Excuse me. You know, that's who should be up there. Maybe not famous, but probably infamous combo. Because that's really where this whole product went wrong. Okay? And when it went wrong, it led to the plaintiffs being injured. And we know that because Real Water's already told you that. Okay? It also led to an investigation. You heard yesterday from Mr. Kemp about the joint governmental investigation from CDC, Southern Nevada Health District, FDA. Okay? Did a big investigation, tried to figure out what the heck is going on. Okay? And they came in, they looked at everything, they went to the facilities, and they ultimately figured it out. You know, they listed Mr. Parker showed you this morning. That was just a small list of the things they found. It was not good. Now, I'm not going to go back through it, but basically they shouldn't have been selling this product. You know, they were not qualified to make or sell this product. And I think that's what the facts are going to show. You know, what's not in those reports, those 3 governmental entities, is anything about the ORC meter being the problem. It's not in there. Okay, it's all Real Water. And the problem is we've made hydrazine, okay? And as Mr. Kemp told you yesterday, you shouldn't have a drop of hydrazine in your bottled water. I don't care what measures what, you don't then add hydrazine, poison, to your water.
Objection.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we approach?
Work on the TV, did you point at this one here?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Counsel, thank you.
I'll see it on the table up there.
Okay,
I'll get it for you when you go. Okay.
so let's talk about the hydrazine and how it gets into the water. Can you put up 390-006? Holy moly. All right. May I approach him?
Yes, you.
Okay. You can go and back out, that's fine. Okay, so, actually, I'm wrong. Let's go to the first one again so we can sort of look at it. and if I implied that they intended to put this in, that's not the case. But nonetheless, it ends up in the product. So if I'm not mistaken, we'll have to ask Dr. Nasheen, but I believe this is the titanium tube, and that little gauge is supposed to be meant to be electricity, and the wires go to the tube. And I believe that's what it testified to. And you heard Mr. Kemp say yesterday, you can go and back out of it, that you go to step one, zap, okay? Water goes through there, hit it with electricity, hydrazine. Step two, zap it again. More hydrazine. Okay, you can back out of it. Okay. Before an ort meter's even been introduced, it's in there. Not intentionally, I'm not implying that. But it's already in there, the poison's in there. And you're not supposed to have a drop of it. And you heard testimony about how it degrades and what the FDA found in the amount, and I believe Dr. Nasheen will talk about how much he thinks was in there. But bottom line is, it's already in there before the ort meter is even introduced in this process. This is bottled water. It's not supposed to have a drop of this in here. So this is already going out to their customers from this point on. Whether a meter measures it correctly or not, it's already in there. Okay, now it gets mixed with the water, water in step 3, and again water in step 4. Right, it gets diluted, and it ultimately ends up in the bottle, big 5-gallon jugs, and the little ones, and that's where they tested with the meter to try and get their negative 225 to 300. Okay, but it's already in there before you take the test. Okay. All right. We heard something about the instructions, and they talked about Milwaukee's operations manager, Jason Brown, and they showed video where he said, you know, I was wrong. I should not have told them. I should not have referred them to that link to the MA9025 kit because we weren't selling it anymore. Couldn't sell it anymore. And so let's pull that up and just look at it. We'll look at the email that they were talking about. Go to 198, please. Okay, so here it is right here. Here's the link. Okay, and it's go to the date. No, go down one. The date for this one, I'm sorry, right here. It's kind of snuck in there.
Yeah.
There. Okay, so February 22nd, 2019, 11:53. And he kept saying, if you remember Jason Brown's testimony, he kept saying, I think they had MA9025. They went back and forth, he looked, and decided he'd made a mistake. Objection on the
No, I'm just getting ready. I see the mistake coming, so I'm just getting ready.
All right. Okay, but what hasn't been told to you is 2 minutes later what happened.
There's a mistake right here. No, can we approach?
Recording. All right. And thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good news, it's just gonna get a lot shorter. So we'll address that issue hopefully later on for you, later on in this case. And try to get you some more answers on that. So I'm just gonna wrap up by saying, at the end of the day, we have this meter, okay? The meter, the argument, or the, I don't want to say argument, because you're not allowed to argue. The suggestion that the facts are that somehow the meter is responsible for adding additional hydrazine, okay? That's the issue that was brought up this morning. But in reality, all it is a meter. And I think that's what Mr. Rasmussen was trying to say, was that it's a meter. It takes a measurement, okay? The measurement is XYZ, whatever it is, okay? And you either add or subtract or whatever you can do. But what you add or what you subtract or what goes in your product is real water's formula, okay? And let's just suppose that it was an inaccurate reading. And I don't know if the evidence is even going to show any of that. But let's just say it was. Does that mean you add hydrazine to the water product? Absolutely not. And the meter couldn't have stopped that in any way, shape, or form. And the other thing you're going to hear from Blaine Jones is whenever they had a reading, you know, there was a suggestion that this meter is the only basis for what they add to the water. That's not what Mr. Jones is going to tell you. Mr. Jones is going to say they get a reading, and then based on their training and knowledge, they decide what they're going to add and how much they're going to add in terms of the concentrate. So it's their knowledge, their training, their experience, their formula. He's also probably going to have to admit that there's no chart. It's not like you get a reading of 218 and you're trying to get 225, so therefore you add X amount of concentrate. They didn't do that. That probably would have been a good idea, especially for Mr. Casey Aikens. Just dumped another bottle of it in there. They didn't have any of that. This is, again, going back to failures of real water, which they've admitted that they've failed. Okay, and they've not sued Milwaukee or Hanna either for this meter. Okay, so we have nothing from the FDA, no lawsuit from Real Water. They've come in here and tell you we messed up. Okay, to their credit, they're coming in here to tell you that. And for that reason, you know, the meter is this issue that's trying to be a distraction from what the product was that injured these people with real water. Okay? And for that reason, we're going to ask you at the end of this case, or I'm going to ask you at the end of this case, to find that Milwaukee was not liable. Okay, and we'll put on all the witnesses. I do want to say that we'll have one expert, Henry Heidel. He's a bottled water expert. Pretty impressive guy. And he'll come in and tell you that, you know, generally bottled water is a pretty safe product, one of the safer products out there. It's fairly obvious that you should not have hydrazine in it. And he'll explain, he went out and looked at, you know, all the investigation reports, and he went out and looked at all the facilities, and he'll come in and he'll give you his opinion on Real Water, their facilities and their processes, and you'll get to hear his opinion at the end of this case too. So thank you very much for your time.
And thank you, sir. And all right, for the record, we have completed what would be called opening statements. Is that correct, Counsel?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. It's my understanding, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin the plaintiff's case in chief. And so at this time, they're going to call their first witness, and you'll start learning what the evidence is in the case. Do you understand?
We will call Dr. Michael Kosnett and remind you of the time restriction.
I understand.
As you ascend, put your things down here, stand facing that first chair on the right hand side, put your right hand.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
May I have you state and spell your name for the record?
Michael J. Kosnett, K-O-S-N-E-T-T.
Please have a seat and watch, be cautious that it appears on the board. Thank you, sir.
Can you move the mic a little bit forward?
Yes, ma'am.
And sir, that's so we can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Your Honor, before we begin, I believe we have stipulations to admit several exhibits that are referenced. For the record, plaintiffs, Exhibit 448, Exhibit 450, Exhibit 475, Exhibit 515, Exhibit 528, Exhibit 545, Exhibit 549, Exhibit 550 and Exhibit 555. These are all scientific published papers that Dr. Kosnett has reviewed and referenced.
Okay, for the record, did you get those men?
Good afternoon, Dr. Kosnett.
Good afternoon.
I don't anticipate your testimony will take long today for the benefit of the jurors. But, can you tell the jury a little bit about your education and current employment?
Sure. I'm a medical toxicologist. I'm a physician who specializes in the field of medicine, the subspecialty that deals with how chemicals and toxic substances affect health. I've been doing that for 32 years. I went to college at Yale University. I had a Bachelor's of Science in Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry. From there, I went to medical school at the University of California, San Francisco. I graduated my MD degree. Then I went on and I specialized in internal medicine. From there, I went on and got a second residency in occupational and environmental medicine, particularly focusing on how chemicals and the environment affect health. And then I went on and did got a third certification fellowship as a medical toxicologist at the University of California, San Francisco. And after all that, I was board certified in internal medicine, occupational medicine, and medical toxicology. And my wife said she would kill me if I got any more. So I did.
Said we're going to be quick. What were you asked to do in this case?
I was asked in this case to look at what could be the cause of, as a toxicologist, what could be the cause of what happened to make people sick from drinking real water. You know, I was aware of the fact that the CDC and the FDA and the Southern Nevada Health District had done some epidemiological investigations, and they came to the conclusion in the spring of 2021 that that there was something in the water, and they, prevented the water from being sold. But CDC never came out, and FDA never came out and said, well, what was the specific agent in the water? They didn't think it was infectious. So counsel came to me and they said, can you look at this and look at all the testing and everything that was done? And as a toxicologist, can you find anything that might have caused it? And so I proceeded to look at the evidence or the available information. And the first thing I did is I wanted to find out, well, what medically has been examined, particularly of the type of liver disease that these people had. Because many of the people, as you know, actually had to be considered even for a liver transplant. And one of the studies I saw, and I'm going to launch it here, is this study was actually published in the American Journal of Gastroenterology, and it was a report on 4 of the people who underwent liver biopsies after being exposed to real water. And it's called acute liver failure due to manufactured alkaline water, a case series of real water-induced liver injury. And what we see, and what I read about this, is that there was a variety of different types of liver damage that occurred in these patients. They included inflammation, they included some cellular injuries, bile stoppage, which we call cholestasis, inflammation of the bile ducts, and even in some cases, scarring of the liver, which is a form of cirrhosis is a form of scarring of the liver. Okay. So I said, if something chemically in this water causes it, it has to be something that really causes liver damage. So the next thing I did is I looked at the FDA test reports. And they had a lot of testing, and I went through it all page by page. And one of the things...
Dr. Kosnett, I'm sorry to cut you off. For the record, the referenced article, Acute Liver Failure Due to Manufactured Alkaline Water, a case series of real water, that is Exhibit 8, and that's been pre-admitted already. And I'm sorry, continue. What was the next thing that you did?
So the next thing I did is said, well, look at the testing that the FDA did, And do I see anything in there that raised an eyebrow to me that this could cause liver damage? And sure enough, buried in the listings of all the things, I saw reference to hydrazine being present. And it was present at a very high quantity. This is in the concentrate. It was used to make the water. I mean, this is over a part per thousand. Sometimes just by reference to toxic substances in water, we're concerned about parts per million. Okay? In arsenic, the standard is 10 parts per billion. And this is a chemical that's toxic, and it's present in the parts per thousand range in this concentrate. So it wasn't just this one sample. In fact, it turned out that they tested 3 different samples of the concentrate, and hydrazine was present in all 3. Okay? In close to the same amounts.
And Dr. Kosnett, you're referring to the testing done by the FDA laboratories in Cincinnati, is that right?
Yes.
And the 2 testing reports that you're referring to are pre-admitted is Exhibits 6 and Exhibits 5.
So I knew that hydrazine, as a toxicologist, I knew that hydrazine was toxic. Okay? And I told counsel, I said, you know, I think this is something that we really have to look into as the cause. And so what I decided is I was going to do a thorough investigation about what was known about the way hydrazine affects the liver, and also at what doses it affects the liver.
Dr. Kosnett, in your review of the FDA testing, did you review any testing that the FDA did on the real water E2 concentrate that did not have hydrazine in it?
No. Every test that they did on the concentrate showed hydrazine.
Thank you. So you referenced that you went about to investigate what is known about how hydrazine affects the liver. How did you investigate that?
Well, I reviewed a lot of information about hydrazine. In fact, let me show you a picture of the chemical structure of hydrazine. And this is a very simple molecule. It's 2 nitrogens and 4 hydrogens. It's inorganic. But you know, this is a very reactive molecule. So when it gets into biological systems, it reacts with it and can cause damage. Okay? So this, and then I said, okay, well, let's look at the literature that shows how does it damage the liver. And I looked for studies, and you know, it's interesting. This has been known, it turns out, for a long time. This is one of the articles I found. This was published in 1908. It's called The Pathological Anatomy of Hydrazine Poisoning. And it turns out, in 1908, they gave animals a single dose, and a bunch of different types of animals, a single dose of hydrazine, and all the animals had liver damage. And they said, you know, that's pretty remarkable. Now, that was a single high dose. So I wanted to say, well, what about situations where people or animals got lower doses, but over a longer period of time?
So, Dr. Kosnett, as we're going through these scientific articles that you researched and looked at, before we get there, can you just tell the jury what is hydrazine?
Okay. Hydrazine, like I said, is an inorganic chemical, and it's soluble in water. It dissolves very well in water. It has, and when it's just look at hydrazine, it has a little bit of an oily consistency to it. But when it's dissolved in water, it's clear and it just dissolves very well in water, and the water won't look funny. By looking at it, it looks like clear water.
What is it used for?
You know, it's used for predominantly as a rocket fuel. Okay? It is, it can be explosive and produce a lot of force when it's, and that's why they use it in rockets. They also use it as auxiliary power or emergency power in F-16s in case the regular power in the plane would fall. That would be a backup power. So it turns out that many of the studies on the toxicity of hydrazine were actually done at the request of the U.S. military, at the request of the Department of Defense. And they did government reports on it. And it wasn't just in our country, it was also in other countries. And so I reviewed that data as well.
And after you started looking into the scientific studies and data on the rocket fuel hydrogen. What else did you find?
Well, a thing that I wanted you to be aware of is a lot of these studies, and I'm going to show you when I mention the studies, has to do with what we call dose. Okay? And dose is the amount of a chemical or drug that's taken or absorbed into the body. And we usually express it in terms of the amount the person takes in divided by their body weight. Okay? So for example, if you have 150 milligrams of a chemical like hydrazine, it could be any chemical, and we give it to someone, we want to know, well, how much does that person weigh? So that's often measured in kilograms of body weight. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So 100 kilograms, for an example in the top line there, 150 milligrams of the chemical in a 100 kilogram adult, that dose is 1.5 milligrams per kilogram per day. Right? If you gave that same amount, 150 milligrams of the chemical, to a child who only weighed 10 kilograms or 22 pounds, who has a higher dose? Well, the child has 15 milligrams per kilogram. So we're going to talk, I want you to bear in mind that I'm going to mention the terms milligrams per kilogram per day. That's how you talk about dose in toxicology.
Dr. Kosnett, can I ask you on this slide? So 100 kilograms, you know, I'm used to the pounds. Pounds I understand. Yeah. So 100 kilograms, is that about?
220 pounds.
So about an adult a little bit larger than me.
Yes.
What about 10 kilograms?
22 pounds.
So a child.
A child.
So
maybe a 2-year-old.
When we talk about dose, if we're giving the same amount, the same quantity to an adult, they're getting a much smaller dose than the same amount given to a child.
That's right.
And is it fair to say that the greater the dose, the greater the harm in terms of a poisonous substance like hydrazine?
Yes, that's true.
What did you do next?
So then I looked at studies that had looked at not just animals getting a single high dose, but getting lower doses over a period of time. And one of the studies that was published was done in Germany in 1988. And they actually, in this, they gave male and female rats different doses of hydrazine in drinking water. Okay? They gave it to them in the drinking water. And they gave it to them over the course of greater than a year. And then when the animals died, they did autopsies on the animals. And they had started this study because they thought they wanted to look at whether hydrazine caused cancer. It turned out it didn't cause cancer, but one of the things that they found was that it caused an increase in the prevalence of what's called bile duct hyperplasia, or a thickening or abnormality of the bile ducts. And those are an important component of the liver. So this was an example of how chronic exposure to hydrazine at lower dose that didn't kill the animals right away caused them to develop abnormalities in the liver. And this appeared at a dose of 0.13 milligrams per kilogram per day in the males rats and 0.77 milligrams per day in the female rats. Why was it higher in the females than the males? It's not clear. That sometimes happens. There's gender difference.
And Dr. Kosnett, at the outset, all of these scientific studies have been admitted into evidence, and to the extent the jurors are interested in reviewing them, they will have that opportunity at the end of the case. So for their benefit, if you could just briefly describe the other studies that you looked at. And
sure. There were several other studies. I'm not going to go through every single one. This was one that was done and published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, where they gave hydrazine to hamsters, and they found at the lowest dose that they tested, this is not necessarily the lowest dose that caused this, but at 3.1 milligrams per kilogram per day, they had liver abnormalities by 19 weeks, and by 38 weeks, almost 2/3 of the animals had cirrhosis of the liver, which is a type, of fibrosis. Is very bad liver damage. Another study that was done in Japan, more recently, and they gave hydrazine to the animals. And in this case, this was in rats and mice, and they found that at a dose of 1.8 milligrams per kilogram, there was an increase in liver enzymes. You've heard earlier about how liver enzymes can go up in people. In this case, well, they found this in the animals. In fact, they had very high enzyme levels at animals who were given 2.65 milligrams per kilogram. And there was another study that was published and discussed, I should say it was reviewed, in a scientific review of hydrazine, which is dozens and dozens of pages long, that was put together by the World Health Organization. And they found that there was damage to the brain and also damage to the liver at a dose as low as 0.03 milligrams per kilogram per day. And in this case, they didn't use just rats, they also used guinea pigs. And sometimes guinea pigs are more sensitive. There's variability, and it's not unusual in studies to see some animals are more sensitive than others, but there's variability. But these studies consistently showed that there was liver damage from long-term of exposure to lower doses of the animals.
What about humans? Did you locate any reports of hydrazine exposure causing liver damage to humans?
Well, you know, there were no experimental studies in people who specifically designed to detect liver damage. But there were three types of evidence that I want to show you like that. Some of them were workplace studies where people who work with hydrazine and developed liver disease. One of them, there were some studies, there was actually a period of time where people were trying to use hydrazine to treat cancer. It didn't work, but it caused bad side effects on the liver. And then there's also, I want to tell you about the fact that there's a drug that is used to treat tuberculosis called isoniazid. And a side effect of isoniazid that's very, very well recognized is liver disease, in some cases liver failure. And it turns out that isoniazid is metabolized to hydrazine. Okay? So let's talk about these briefly. This is one of the studies that we saw, and this was published in Finland, and actually it was a gentleman who worked with hydrazine 1 day a week. He handled it. They didn't specify exactly, but he probably had some inhalation exposure and dermal exposure, and he was a machinist. And after 6 months, he started to get ill. And he went to see a doctor, and when he went to the doctor, he had jaundice. You know what jaundice is? Yellow jaundice. Your eyes are yellow. Sometimes your skin is yellow. It's what happens when you have when you have liver failure. And that's what he had. He had a very high bilirubin. That's what causes you to become jaundiced. And he wound up actually dying. And they attributed his death to being exposed to hydrazine. And when they did an autopsy, they found evidence of liver damage. Now, I looked at how much we estimated he was exposed to, and I had to make some estimations. And I think his exposure could have been as low as 0.14 milligrams per kilogram per day. You see, I'm always highlighting in yellow what the dose is, because we're going to come back to that. Now, there were some other studies. Remember I told you about the studies that were done on people who were being exposed through cancer, a cancer treatment. There was an unorthodox doctor, a doctor named Dr. Gold, back in the 70s. And he had this theory. He was not a mainstream physician, but he had this theory that got around that hydrazine could somehow be helpful in treating cancer or helping people who were developing what we call cachexia, or loss of weight and thinning and wasting away, if they gave them hydrazine. So, because there was a lot of clamoring of patients, especially patients who nothing else was working to do it, there were some studies that looked at it. They didn't do formal controlled studies, but they gave some people hydrazine, okay? And they published this. And this is one report in 1975. They gave some people with disseminated cancer, in other words, bad advanced cancer. They gave 29 of them hydrazine, and it didn't help them get better. But some of those patients got evidence of elevated bilirubin, liver damage, and some of them had elevated liver enzymes. Now, the National Cancer Institute, the National Academy of Sciences actually referred to this study when they were asked to look at the Gulf War veterans. Remember the Gulf War veterans, there was a lot of sense of them getting ill. This was back in the early, in the Bush administration when they, invaded Iraq, and there was concerns. And, the veterans were maybe exposed to hydrazine because it was used in rockets, propelled rockets and missiles. So they looked at it and they said, in their opinion, looking at the data, that these individuals, some of whom had evidence of liver damage, were exposed to 0.2 to 0.7 milligrams per kilogram per day.
What about the drug isoniazid?
Well, just let me say real briefly, this is another study that I think is worth just mentioning real quickly. This was a gentleman who self-treated him. He went to the internet and ordered hydrazine over the internet. And he took it to treat he had cancer of the maxillary sinus. The maxillary sinus is, the sinuses in the head.
He's reading about Dr. Gold.
This was, even though most people said it didn't work, there's people who believe if they have cancer, they'll try anything. And unfortunately, this man, he took it for 4 months, and then he went to medical attention, and he was jaundiced. It was admitted to the hospital. He had severe liver damage. His bilirubin was 43.2. The normal was less than 1.2. And despite aggressive treatment, he went on to die, of both hepatic and GI bleeding. And if we
I'm sorry, just cut you off, Dr. Kosnett, but that's hepatic encephalopathy.
Yes, he died of hepatic encephalopathy, which is a form of brain swelling and brain damage that you get when your liver fails. Remember that was talked about that some patients, in this case, had hepatic encephalopathy. So this is a guy who's taking hydrazine, and he died, and he had hepatic encephalopathy. And the dose, which we calculated, was 0.38 milligrams per kilogram.
Okay, now isoniazid.
Right. So isoniazid, as I mentioned, is a drug that's used to treat tuberculosis. Or if you've been exposed to tuberculosis, you have to take it for sometimes 6 months to 9 months. But it's well known that about 20% of the people who take isoniazid develop evidence of liver injury. And in some studies, as many as 1%, it becomes so severe that it can sometimes fatal. That's a side effect of isoniazid. And they looked in studies in animals, this is some of the studies we looked at, and they thought that it was the hydrazine that was responsible. And I can show you why they thought hydrazine was responsible. Your Honor, can I approach the point something on the slide?
Objection.
I'll talk loud, so hopefully.
It's okay.
This is INH. This is the drug INH. And what I want you to notice, remember we said that hydrazine was 2 nitrogens and two hydrogens? This little piece here, when it's metabolized, becomes hydrazine. Okay? And so they found out in their animal studies, it takes this enzyme to produce it. If this enzyme is inhibited, if you give them another drug, guess what? You don't get the animals didn't get the damage from the isoniazid. They didn't get the liver damage. Also, you see this arrow here and this arrow here? This is an enzyme that converts either the INH or the hydrazine to other compounds, which are less toxic. This enzyme is called NAT2, or N-acetyltransferase 2. This is the important point. People have different levels of that naturally. Okay? Some people have lower levels, and some people have higher levels. The people who have low levels, it doesn't act as much. This process is slow. This detoxification process is slow. And they're called slow acetylators. And guess what? If you are a slow acetylator, you're more susceptible if you get isoniazid to developing liver failure. And probably, if you're a slow acetylator and you get exposed to hydrazine, you are going to be more likely to get liver damage. So that's why not everyone who took real water got liver failure. But there's a reason for why some people may be more susceptible than others. Okay? It's how much genetically this enzyme were born. And we know there's different levels. Okay? And in some cases, as many as, in some groups of people, ethnic groups, it can be as much as 50% of the people are slow ascenders.
Dr. Kosnett, can we look at the dose that you found with isoniazid and then go to the chart?
Yes. So I actually said, okay, well, if you're taking isoniazid at the standard dose, how much hydrazine is produced? And my estimate, if you assume that 1 molecule of isoniazid gets converted to 1 molecule of hydrazine, and the standard dose of isoniazid, which is also abbreviated INH, is 5 milligrams per kilogram, then the dose of hydrazine that's causing this toxicity in some of the people who take INH, not everyone, is about 1 milligram per kilogram. So I've presented to you a bunch of different studies with a bunch of different doses. So now you were wondering, well, how much hydrazine did the people get who drank real water? Okay? And I looked into that and did some calculations. And basically, if I can approach.
Well, Dr. Kosnett, you looked at this, and based on the information that we know about the hydrazine that was tested in the concentrate, and how that's the process that's used followed to make the water. It's diluted down a little bit in the finished product. And you came up with an approximate range given that information.
Yes.
And then compare that to the studies and the doses, right?
So I looked at the
last
median dose, and I did some calculations here for the median dose and the 95th percentile. And this is what we got. The 95th percentile hydrazine dose from real water would have been 0.97, and this is for like people who are consuming it. Now, some people could take a lot more, and some people have, remember, individual variability. But looking at the average dose, the median dose of 0.37 and the 95th percentile dose, you see the numbers 0.97 and 0.37? They fit right in the range of the studies we just described from animals and from humans of the doses that were experimentally shown to cause liver damage. So I concluded, and it is my belief, to a reasonable degree of medical probability, that the hydrazine in the real water was responsible for some people getting liver damage by drinking real water.
Dr. Kosnett, just to sum up, the greater the dose, the greater the harm.
Yes.
Right? Hydrazine was in the real water based on the information you looked at.
Right.
Hydrazine is rocket fuel.
It's used in rocket fuel, yes.
Hydrazine, the rocket fuel, causes liver damage in some people who get a big enough dose. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you, Dr. Kosnett. That's all I have for you. I believe my colleague will have another question. Shane, can you put up slide number 7 for me? Dr. Kosnett, I will be very brief, really brief. Outside. Explain to me, as quickly as you can, this bile duct hyperplasia.
Okay. So the liver does a lot of things. It metabolizes drugs. It's used. It also produces bile. And bile contains some bile acids and also some bilirubin. And it flows through bile ducts in the liver into the gallbladder. And then when we eat a meal, particularly a fatty meal, some of that bile leaves the gallbladder and goes into the intestinal tract especially to help absorb or break down fats. Okay? And that's why some people who have gallbladder disease, it gets worse after they eat a fatty meal. Okay? One of the things that was found in this particular study is that in these animals, one of the earliest signs of damage from the hydrazine at the lower level was it caused damage to the bile ducts.
And not unlike the liver with bile ducts, there's a transmission of bile to the gallbladder.
There's a transmission of bile from the liver to the gallbladder.
Nothing further. Thank you so much.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Allison, good afternoon. I'm going to be brief as well. I know the time is getting late. Were you here for opening statements?
For part of them, yes.
Okay. Were you here, did you see the setup as to how real water was made with big mixing tanks?
Yes.
I want to follow up on something you said. You said that hydrazine dissolves very easily in water. Is that
Yes.
pretty accurate? What do you mean by that?
It means that, well, I don't have the exact amount, but it's not like putting vegetable oil in water where they separate out. If you put hydrazine in water, it goes into solution.
Okay, can we use like something that everyday people understand, like perhaps, is it like when you're making spaghetti and they tell you to put a little bit of salt in the water and you put a little salt and it's just gone after you've stirred around with the noodles?
It's probably not as soluble as salt
Okay.
in water, but it dissolves in water. It dissolves in water.
Okay, I appreciate that. So the hydrazine that ended up in the real water, it's gonna be pretty well dissolved.
Yes.
And it's not-
It's called miscible. It's suspended, very fine suspension.
Hang on, just one sec. You're on the fix them out of the box. Did a bottle of water go back to the room?
Real water bottle of water?
Yeah, we have a real bottle of water.
I got it. It's back here.
Thanks, man. So if I'm understanding correctly, basically the hydrazine that's going to be in the real water, you can't see it.
That's right.
Can you smell it?
Depends on how much was there. It's possible, sometimes it has an ammonia type smell if it's present in high enough concentrations. Depends on how much.
Is it going to be oily? Is the water going to be oily, or it's all dissolved in here?
Again, it depends on how much.
Is it going to be red?
No.
Is it going to be a fishy smell?
Not always. I mean, like I said, it could be if it was high enough amount, but in general, not always.
Is it going to look like dirt in the water?
I don't think so.
Dr. Kosnett, you've been a delight. You've entertained the jury. I appreciate you answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Is it okay, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Kosnett, did I say that right?
Yes,
You're a toxicologist, correct?
correct.
I'm not gonna go over your qualifications. I just need to know, in your toxicology, do you ever use an ORP?
No,
Do you ever use one?
no.
You said also that, and I wanted, and you may have not said this, so I want to make sure that I was clear. You said something about it, hydrazine is inorganic?
Yes.
Okay. Can you help the jury tell me, what does the word inorganic mean?
Inorganic means it doesn't have carbon generally. That's a good way, or complex carbon. You know, carbon dioxide is a gas, they wouldn't really call that carbon, but like, for example, proteins and enzymes and you know, the tissues in our body, that's organic, and those contain carbon. Hydrazine, it's nitrogen and hydrogen. It doesn't have any carbon. It's not derived directly from a human animal tissue or human tissue.
So that's what I was going to ask is can hydrazine, or have you ever found that hydrazine was created in a human body? In other words,
Naturally?
Yes.
No.
So in other words, under no conditions have you ever found, I'm an athlete, I'm working out, whatever I'm doing, maybe I'm getting close to death, and does my body, have you ever found anything where the body creates?
I haven't found that.
So have you ever done anything with regards to how hydrazine is created?
Well, hydrazine can be caused by some reactions in water, and I think the jury will hear from Dr. Najim.
Okay, so you would defer to Dr. Najim on that?
Dr. Najim is one of the world's experts on how hydrazine appears in water.
And he would be better to ask that question than you?
Yes.
But as a toxicologist, you've never seen it actually develop in a
I
person?
don't think it's made naturally.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, doctor, no question.
Right, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, can we approach? Okay. We have two questions from the jury. I just want to report you about this. Is the bottle admitted into evidence?
That's demonstrative.
Oh.
There's not a sure.
All right, Doctor, before we leave, and we're actually doing pretty good because it's still before 5. Right? So we've done really well. I didn't know we'd get here, but we were doing okay. And so we have a couple of questions, Doctor. And the first question was from juror number 8. And here's the question, Dr. Cloak. How much intake of hydrazine does it take to damage your liver?
It's a good question, and the answer is it depends on how long you take it for. So if you take it just for a couple of days, it takes a lot more. If you take it for weeks to a month, you know, I showed you that chart. I would say, roughly speaking, between 1/10 of a milligram per kilogram per day, maybe lower, because some of the animal studies were lower. You notice that one of the animal studies was down. But you notice most of them are between the range of 0.13 to 1 milligram per kilogram per day. So there's a variability. But I think that based on the amount some of the evidence of how much hydrazine was in the concentrate and how it was diluted, that a person who typically took it, drank a liter or 2 or sometimes more, would be in the range of capable of causing this condition. And remember what I said, some people are more susceptible to others. So some people might be sensitive at much lower levels. Some people wouldn't be affected at all. And that's what we saw in this outbreak. Not everyone who drank real water came to medical attention, but some people got really ill.
All right, Doctor, I have one more question for you from juror number 9. Well, when you say hydrazine is inorganic, does that mean it is manufactured or man-made?
No, it can be not. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's manufactured. I mean, we can make it, like when they make jet fuel, they actually produce it, but it can also occur through naturally occurring chemical reactions in the environment. And Dr. Najim, who's a specialist on water, will also talk about how it goes. Dr. Najim did some studies, which he'll talk about, which actually showed that some samples of water around the country have hydrazine. But in this situation, there was a lot of it, a higher amount than is typically present, naturally occurring in water. Much, much, much more.
Okay.
Right. One final question, Your Honor. Dr. Kosnett, all of the opinions that you testified to today, were they all stated to a reasonable degree of medical probability?
They were.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Okay. They tell me 9:15 on Monday. Right. And so anyway, ladies and gentlemen, so far we're doing very good. We got really on track. It's 5 minutes to 5. And we want to get done before 5 o'clock. And I just want to remind you, Monday morning, 9:15, we'll be ready to go. And secondly, you're admonished not to converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial, or to read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial by any persons connected with this case, or by any medium of information, including without limitations, newspaper, television, radio, no social media. Remember that, and I know you do. Or to form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until the cause is finally submitted to you. And so I want you to enjoy your weekend, have a safe drive home, and we'll see you Monday morning at 9:15, ready to go. So.
Can you excuse me?
Oh, I will. Don't worry. I'm in control. All right. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you're released.
All rise to report to the jury.
Jury is clear. All right, thank you, sir. I doubt you're released. Thank you. I wanted to get the jury out. Well, good job. Right?
Understand.
I want to get the jury out. All right. I guess so, Monday morning, 9:15, right? Yes, sir. Okay, our next witness will be? Oh, yeah, and before you go, we need to make sure we have everything taken care of.
So there was mention of pre-admitted exhibits. I need a list, or we need to go over right now all pre-admitted exhibits, even if they were already in the motions in limine or whatever, on the record during the trial, exhibit number blank has to be stated that it's pre-admitted. Also, when using demonstrative exhibits, I need to know on the record and where the transcriber is if an exhibit is demonstrative or admitted. So if we can go over that, that would be great.
You got that? Everybody understand?
Should we do that now, Cory?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I mean, if you're ready, if not, we can do it Monday morning, it's up to you. Mr. Rasmussen. Whichever is easier.
Do you guys have a list, Eric?
Might be easier to prepare a list.
Yeah, I think it'd be better.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm sorry, Cory.
And that list will have to be filed.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it
understand.
would be better.
I don't think everybody's ready right now to look at that list.
I think you're right. I have one quick
Housekeeping.
issue, not issue. Mr. Blaine Jones has issued a subpoena to appear at trial. He's indicated on Monday or Tuesday, talking to plaintiff's counsel, they don't want him Monday or Tuesday. Then he travels for work before he returns back to Las Vegas. And he may not be back before this trial is over. I just want to make a record of that. He's coming back on October 2nd.
We had planned on using his deposition. I think I said that during the motion. I know the procedure, so we're just going to use his deposition. And we're going to use very, very selective cuts. So it's not a problem for us to put him on Monday.
Yeah, I don't know if we agree on it or not. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah, well, the only thing I can say is this, I think he'll be back on October 2nd. I don't anticipate being completed.
We might.
I anticipate being completed by October 2nd.
Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like that.
And he'll still be
I love
going.
your
Step will be done.
optimism, Mr. Kemp, I do, and I will. I'm just going to admit, you're very efficient. You are, you're very efficient when it comes to witnesses. I wish we had efficiency like that in everything. We'll see.
Thank you.
But you know what? The bottom line is, this is how I look at it. We have been doing extremely well from an efficiency perspective.
Sure.
And we're much further along the way than I anticipated. Right? Right, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you.